The air was dead. Harry Osborn could no longer hear the familiar hum of New York City's heartbeat. No cars, no voices, no neon glow. His world, the world he had spent every ounce of himself protecting, was gone. It had been torn apart in fire and silence when evil Spider-Man and his acolytes swept across reality. And now only the charred bones of buildings remained. The city was an open grave, the sky a burnt canvas of red and ash. Harry stood alone amidst the rubble, his mask torn, one arm bleeding through the fractured remains of his suit. The web of life, that great tapestry binding all Spider-Men and women, was gone. In its place was a suffocating emptiness that seemed to whisper his failure back to him with every breath. Harry stumbled across what had once been his home, stepping over bodies and glass, until his eyes landed on something that forced him to his knees. A scorched butler's glove. Bernard's, his father figure. The last tether to a semblance of family, gone like the rest. Harry's throat tightened as he whispered his name, the sound escaping like a prayer to a god who no longer answered. For the first time since the spider bit him, he felt like that frightened boy who had grown up in Norman Osborn's shadow, powerless to stop the world from burning. His knuckles tightened against the earth. All he could do was whisper through cracked lips, "I won't let it end here." It was then he heard the crunch of stone, the familiar sound of footsteps carefully navigating ruin. From the smoke emerged her silhouette, MJ Watson of the 2002 world, the girl who had been bitten by the spider instead of Peter. She wore the red and blue still, though her mask was torn and her shoulders carried the same exhaustion. Her world had been spared for now, but she was stranded too, a refugee of destruction. She looked at Harry with eyes that mirrored his own, broken, furious, but unwilling to surrender. The two had been allies once in the chaos of the multiverse, but trust between them had never been simple. Now, standing in the ruins, trust was all they had left. "Harry," she said softly, almost cautiously, "it's just us now." Harry didn't answer at first. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon, on the black streak in the sky where the portal had torn reality open before collapsing it into nothingness. The silence stretched long enough to hurt, but finally he rasped, "Then we find others. We're not enough, not against him." The name wasn't spoken, but it didn't need to be. The throne of evil Spider-Man loomed like a phantom in their minds. They had seen him sitting there, surrounded by stolen souls, his voice booming with the hunger of a god. They had seen his claws cut worlds apart. He was no longer Peter Parker, he was something else, a monster made from betrayal and despair. And yet, deep in Harry's chest, he wondered if there had ever been anything left of Peter at all. The days that followed blurred into survival and search. Harry and MJ wandered across the remnants of fractured universes, traveling through dimensional scars left behind by the harvest. They found whispers of survivors, faded radio signals, distress calls frozen in broken timelines. Most were dead before they arrived, but a few endured, hardened by their own losses. A darker Spider-Man draped in black leather stepped from the shadows of an abandoned church. Back in black, his eyes hollow but his fists still steady. From the ruins of an ultimate world, they found another who had permanently bonded with the symbiote. His body a twisted fusion of man and alien, but his spirit still fighting on the side of justice. They joined them, not out of hope, because none of them had much left, but because survival demanded it. One by one, more fragments of broken spider people gathered, each bearing scars from battles already lost. They did not trust easily, nor did they forgive Harry for what had happened to the web. But in their silence was a grim agreement. Evil Spider-Man had to be stopped, even if none of them survived the attempt. At night, Harry would dream of the trio, the Peter, MJ, and Harry from another 2002, who had carried their world together. He saw their deaths replay in his mind like a record stuck on a single bloody note. He dreamed of their screams as their souls were torn into the throne, of their faces fading into nothingness. Sometimes he swore he could still hear their voices in the static of the ruined air. Ghosts. Maybe his guilt made him imagine them, but deep down he knew. They weren't gone. They were trapped somewhere deeper, somewhere worse. And every time Harry closed his eyes, he saw the throne. Evil Spider-Man sitting atop it, his claws dripping with the essence of fallen heroes. The sky around him burned with the fires of hell, and at his side, the devils of every universe bowed. But in the shadows, another figure always waited, red-skinned, grinning, watching. Mephisto, the true devil of this story, the whisper that had been pulling strings from the beginning. Harry woke each time drenched in sweat, gasping like a man drowning. He would sit up, fists shaking, whispering to himself the vow he had made when he found Bernard's glove. I won't let it end here. But as he stared at MJ and the others, asleep in their fractured camp, he felt the creeping doubt in his chest. Maybe it already had. There was no sound in hell, only the thunder of silence, broken now and then by the faint echoes of screams that were not theirs. Peter Parker, MJ, and Harry of the trio walked through a wasteland of red stone and burning sky, their bodies no longer flesh but something half remembered, half alive. They had been killed in the soul harvest, their essences torn from their mortal shells and fed into the throne of evil Spider-Man. Yet instead of annihilation, they had awoken here, adrift in the endless corridors of Mephisto's realm. The first days, if they could be called days, were agony. Every step felt like being pulled apart and rebuilt, their memories clawed at by unseen hands. Peter staggered under the weight of guilt. He remembered the moment of failure too vividly, the way evil Spider-Man's claws had pierced him, the way MJ's scream had been silenced. MJ herself burned with rage, her spectral hands shaking each time she looked at Peter, though she said nothing, and Harry, broken and scarred even in this phantom form, tried to play peacemaker as he always had, though despair hung heavy in his voice. They weren't alone. Around them drifted others, shadows of spider people they recognized or dead. And many they did not. Some bore familiar masks, torn and cracked. Others were little more than fragments. Faces swallowed by flame. There was a Spider-Man who had fallen in the civil war of another Earth. A Gwen whose voice broke as she whispered her father's name into the void. A Miles who had been erased before his story truly began. They all looked to the trio as if expecting something, anything, that could give their torment meaning. But Peter had no answers. He barely had the strength to keep walking. It was then the whispers began, at first faint, like static pressing at the edges of their minds, but then clearer. Voices they had known in life. Ben Parker's steady baritone, Gwen Stacy's bright laugh, Aunt May's gentle guidance. They echoed through hell, not as memories, but as presences. Souls that had been bound here long before, trapped by the same bargains and sins. The whispers urged them forward, deeper into the black halls, where the throne's shadow reached even here. And in those whispers, a truth revealed itself. Mephisto had not just bargained for Peter's soul, he had laced the deal with poison. Every spider killed in the harvest, every soul consumed by evil Spider-Man, was being funneled here to hell itself. The trio and the countless others were not merely dead, they were fuel. A growing army of chained spirits waiting for their essence to be weaponized. But death does not always mean surrender. As the trio wandered further, they found others who refused to kneel. A Spider-Man whose body had rotted away, but whose spirit burned bright enough to defy the flames. Zombie Spider-Man, but whole, his infection cleansed in death. A spider-monkey variant whose agility, even in spectral form, mocked the demons that tried to bind him. A Spider-Woman clad in silver armor, shimmering with fractured shards of light, her voice unbroken despite the chains. These spirits were defiant, angry, unwilling to let their names be reduced to footnotes in Mephisto's ledger. They rallied around the trio, not as leaders, but as companions in damnation. Peter could feel something changing inside him. The pain was still there, the guilt still gnawed at his core. But the longer he listened to the whispers of Ben, Gwen, and May, the stronger his resolve grew. Perhaps they were trapped in hell, but they weren't powerless. There was a strength in the unity of the fallen, a strange energy that flickered between them when they stood together. It wasn't life, not exactly. It was something older, stranger. Power born of suffering, power born of memory. And somewhere in the distance, sitting upon his throne in the realm of the living, evil Spider-Man felt it too. A tremor, a crack in the silence he had built from his slaughter. The souls he had consumed were stirring. The trio didn't yet know what it meant. They didn't yet know that their rebellion would echo beyond hell's walls. But as Peter clenched his fists and whispered a vow to the ghosts around him, the flames at their feet shifted, bent, not consuming but shaping. The ghost army was waking, and when it rose, not even the devil himself would remain untouched. In the void where universes once shimmered, now only ash remained. Evil Spider-Man sat upon his throne, a grotesque amalgam of webbing, bone, and souls pulsating with stolen light. The seat itself seemed alive, writhing as though it breathed in rhythm with him. His mask had long fused to his face, the eyes stretched wider than they should be. Twin pits of cold fire. The symbiotic claws that had become his fingers tapped against the throne's arms, each movement drawing sparks of spectral energy from the husks beneath him. The villains, his acolytes, stood before him in broken reverence. Scorpion from one universe, his tail now grafted with demonic barbs. Craven the Hunter, eyes glowing faintly, his mind barely his own. A twisted version of Green Goblin who no longer laughed, his mask melted into his flesh. Silent as a guard dog, they had once thought themselves masters, but now they were tools. Shadows stripped of will. Their only task was to scour across realities, harvesting more spider souls to feed their master. Today they brought him trophies, the remnants of a Spider-Man who had worn a red and black armored suit, slain in some war-torn Manhattan. The flickering core of a Spider-Woman who had defended her universe until its sky cracked in two. They dropped the souls at his feet, and the throne devoured them eagerly. But as the energy coursed through him, something was wrong. It burned differently, jagged, like a song played out of tune. Evil Spider-Man stiffened. For a moment, just a flicker, he heard voices, not screams, not the pleas of those he consumed, but whispers, whispers he recognized. Peter. His hand twitched, claws scraping sparks from the throne. He shook his head. He had silenced those voices long ago, buried them deep in his soul, torn them out piece by piece. Yet here they were, Ben Parker's steady intonation, Aunt May's soft call, Gwen's laugh. Worse still, he heard MJ's voice, not the ones he had killed, but hers, the one he had loved in another lifetime. The villains shifted uneasily, sensing his agitation. Scorpion stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Master, is something wrong?" Spider-Man rose slowly, towering, the throne stretching and hissing as he pulled away from it. No. His voice was hollow, doubled. as if two beings spoke through him. Everything is under control. But inside, everything was not. For the first time since his ascension, he felt doubt. His power was vast, nearly infinite, but it was not absolute. The souls inside him stirred like embers refusing to die. And far below, in the black pits of hell, they were gathering. He crossed the chamber, staring out into the void. Where once the web of life had stretched, now there was nothing but emptiness. He had destroyed it, unwoven the strands, and left only fragments drifting. And yet, in that emptiness, he felt resistance. The web wanted to be reborn. It yearned for balance. Impossible, he hissed, his claws digging into his own arm. I killed you all. But the truth clawed back. He hadn't killed them, not fully. The souls were still tethered, whispering, uniting, threatening to undo him from within. Mephisto's laughter echoed faintly at the edge of his mind, as if mocking his triumph. He had thought himself the god of the spider, but in truth, he was a vessel, a pawn. And now, even his throne felt less like a seat of power, and more like a cage. His eyes narrowed. If the souls thought they could resist, he would break them again. If hell thought it could defy him, he would descend into its heart and devour it whole. He would not rest until every fragment of Spider-Man, every shadow of Peter Parker, every whisper of May, Ben, Gwen, or MJ was extinguished. Evil Spider-Man clenched his claws into a fist, the throne roaring with energy behind him. If they want war in hell, then I'll bring it to them. And with that, he sent his acolytes back into the multiverse, not just to harvest, but to desecrate, to make sure no memory, no ghost, no soul could stand against him. Yet even as he spoke the words, the whispers grew louder. And in a chamber of fire and shadow, 3 ghosts smiled grimly. The gathering of the broken Harry. Osborn had been walking through ash for what felt like days. His mask cracked, his suit torn, every step a reminder of the battles lost. The destruction of his world still lingered like smoke in his lungs. Every building shattered, every life reduced to silence. Beside him, MJ moved with an unshakable determination. She was younger than him, her hair pulled tight beneath the crimson mask, but her steps carried none of his weariness. She came from a world that had given her no choice but to fight, and now she had become his anchor. When he faltered, she pushed forward. When he thought about laying down in the ruins, she reminded him that there was still something left worth fighting for. Yet neither of them could ignore the truth. They were 2 spiders against a god. They needed allies. The first they found in the husk of another New York, a city trapped under eternal rain, neon bleeding across cracked pavement. This was the domain of the Back in Black Spider-Man, a Peter Parker who had never shed the symbiote's influence after the early 2000s. He wasn't Venom. Not exactly. His voice was deeper, his movements sharper, but his eyes still carried the weariness of Peter Parker. He killed when he had to, his fists striking harder than Harry could stomach, but he wasn't lost. He knew restraint. At first, he resisted them. You want me to fight him? I've already buried my aunt, my uncle, my MJ. What's left for me? But Harry understood that pain. He stepped forward and told him plainly, what's left is us. We may not win, but if we don't fight, then his throne swallows everything. Something in Peter's eyes flickered at that. After a long silence, he nodded. Their second recruit came from a shattered ultimate reality, where the symbiote Spider-Man had taken root and never been purged. He was younger, restless, his black suit shifting constantly, as though alive. He didn't just carry the power, he embraced it, and yet he'd managed to bend it toward good. He called himself the Balance Peter, a bridge between man and monster. He agreed almost instantly. Not for Harry, but because he had seen his friends and heroes fall, and he wanted revenge. His passion unsettled Harry. Power like that, driven by vengeance, could tip either way. But they had no choice but to trust him. The third came as a surprise. They tracked a rumor across a fractured version of Earth, where war had never ended. Endless battles between metahumans had scorched the soil to glass. And in the heart of it, swinging across burning skyscrapers, was Spider Flash, a variant where Flash Thompson had been bitten in 2002. Unlike the others, he was brutal, a soldier more than a hero. He killed without hesitation, hanging bodies of criminals from the webs as warnings. But his city still stood, and his people still lived. When Harry and MJ revealed the threat of evil Spider-Man, Flash sneered. Sounds like someone finally worth killing. Reluctantly, they accepted him. Harry's stomach turned at the thought of fighting side by side with someone who mirrored his father's ruthlessness, but he couldn't deny Flash's strength. As the small band gathered in the ruins of an abandoned safe house, Harry finally allowed himself to breathe. There were 5 of them now. Himself, MJ, Back in Black, Symbiote Ultimate, and Spider Flash. 5 against 1 god. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Harry studied them, unease crawling through him. They weren't just a team. They were broken reflections of Peter Parker, each one a reminder of how fragile the line was between hero and monster. He wondered if he belonged among them at all, or if he was just another shadow waiting to fall. MJ noticed his silence. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said quietly. But Harry only stared into the dark horizon. "If I don't, we're all dead." That night, as they rested in shifts, Harry couldn't sleep. He saw flashes in his dreams. A throne of bones, a mask, stretched into a permanent scream, and the trio's faces, not alive, but whispering, as though they were trapped just out of reach. When he woke, sweat dripping down his face, he realized the truth. The trio hadn't been destroyed. Not completely. He could still feel them, faintly, like echoes through the void. And in that moment, he knew. This war wouldn't just be fought in the living world, it would be fought in hell. Death had no silence. Peter, MJ, and Harry awoke not in void, but in fire. Their bodies were gone, yet they felt every nerve still screaming. The ground beneath them was bone dust, endless fields of skulls crushed to powder. Above, the sky boiled like molten glass, and the screams of 1,000 spider variants carried on the wind. This was hell. They had expected nothingness, obliteration at evil Spider-Man's hand, but instead, they had been chained here, dragged into the underworld as trophies, and yet something was wrong. They could move. They could speak. Their souls, though bruised, hadn't been erased. Where are we? MJ's voice cracked. She clutched her side, though she no longer had flesh to bleed. Harry answered with hollow certainty. "We're dead." Peter stumbled forward, his hands trembling. He looked down at himself, translucent and flickering, and then at the endless rows of figures around them. Some were crawling, some screaming, some curled into shapes of despair. All Spider-Men. And then it hit them. This wasn't just their prison. It was a graveyard of every Spider-Man that evil Spider-Man had devoured. At the center of it all was a throne, a grotesque monument of webbing hardened into bone-white stone, pulsing with a sickly red light. Evil Spider-Man sat upon it in the living world, but its shadow cast here as well, a second seat in hell, tethered by his deal with Mephisto. And from that throne, veins of crimson energy snaked outward, burrowing into the souls trapped below. When Peter drew too close, the veins lashed at him. He stumbled back, but in that instant he felt it. Evil Spider-Man hadn't consumed them fully. They weren't food, they were fuel. "He's feeding off us," Peter whispered, rage igniting in his hollow chest. "We're not gone. We're his power source." At first, despair crushed them. They had failed, their world was gone, and their souls were shackled to their killer's strength. But slowly, whispers rose among the other shades. Voices of Spider-Men and Spider-Women, soft at first, then louder, chanting, growing into a chorus. The trio turned, and hundreds of spectral eyes glowed back at them. These weren't just fragments, they were legions, and in that moment, the truth hit them. If evil Spider-Man could draw power from their souls, then maybe they could pull it back. MJ clenched her fists. "He doesn't own us, not completely." Harry's ghost smile was grim. "Then let's remind him what happens when you corner a spider." Their rebellion began as a flicker. The trio reached out to the souls closest to them, whispering, urging, reminding them of who they were. A Spider-Woman from the 60s, a noir Spider-Man still in his trench coat even as Ash, an armored MKI variant, his spectral plates cracked but intact. Slowly, one by one, the souls stirred, and when they stirred, the throne shuddered. Far above in the living world, evil Spider-Man paused. He felt it, a tickle at the edge of his mind, like something scratching from beneath the floorboards. He snarled and pushed it down, tightening his hold on the throne. The screams in hell intensified, as if he were punishing them for daring to resist. But the trio didn't stop. They shouted louder, they pulled harder, and the whispers grew into roars. For the first time since their deaths, they felt a surge of power not born of evil Spider-Man's corruption, but of themselves. It was raw, unstable, spectral, yet real. They weren't bodies anymore, but they were still spiders. As they stood together, their forms solidified, half ghost, half light. Peter's eyes glowed white. MJ's hair burned like flame. Harry's spectral blade of webbing shimmered with jagged edges. They were shadows, but they were warriors still. And the throne trembled again. The trio looked at the horizon of souls, all of them flickering, all of them watching. "This isn't his hell anymore," Peter said. His voice echoed like thunder. "This is ours." Meanwhile, Mephisto smiled in the dark. From his perch beyond the flames, he watched as the trio's rebellion began to crack evil Spider-Man's grip. His red eyes gleamed with amusement. "The game pieces move themselves," he whispered, "and yet they never see the board." Evil Spider-Man sat high, above the ruined husk of a universe, his claws flexing over the rivers of spectral energy that poured from the cracks in reality. Souls flowed to him as they always had, every fallen spider a thread added to his growing tapestry of godhood. Yet something was wrong. The flow no longer felt smooth. It sputtered, spasmed, pulsed with resistance. He clenched his jaw, fangs bared. "Quiet," he hissed, forcing his will down the current. The throne obeyed briefly, but in the silence that followed he heard it. Whispers, faint, rasping voices calling his name. Not in awe, not in terror, but in defiance. They weren't broken, not all the way. In hell, the trio's power grew with each soul they awakened. At first, the whispers were scattered, fragments of identity clinging to tatters of memory. But now, they became chants. Full-throated cries rising up like a storm. Entire armies of spiders, spectral and seething, were beginning to remember themselves. Peter, MJ, and Harry stood at the head of it, luminous against the red-black wastelands. They weren't generals, they were sparks. And the fire was spreading. But as the fire spread, it fed something else. Evil Spider-Man's paranoia. He staggered from his throne, claws digging into his own mask, as if to rip out the sound. The villains who had pledged themselves as his acolytes, Craven, Scorpion, the variant Goblin, Even Doc Ock, bound in warped symbiote plating, watched uneasily. "Master," Craven growled. "You falter?" Evil Spider-Man turned, his voice a low snarl. "No, they're scratching. They're clawing from the grave. They whisper that I am nothing but a shell." He shoved Craven aside, his claws slicing into the stone beneath them. "But I am everything. I am Spider God. I am the web itself." The acolytes bowed, but behind their eyes doubt flickered. For the first time, their master looked shaken. Across the broken multiverse, OG Harry and MJ 2002 were not yet aware of the rebellion in hell, but they felt its tremors. In the shattered remains of Harry's old world, among skyscrapers collapsed into oceans of glass, Harry knelt before the wreckage of his mansion. The walls were gone, but the fireplace stood, and above it the portrait of Norman shattered in half. He touched the jagged frame, the weight of failure pressing down harder than any battle had. "This is all that's left," he murmured. His voice cracked. MJ 2002, leaning against the ruins of a pillar, said nothing at first. She had seen her own world suffer, the goblins' rise, the collapse of her friends, but nothing like this. Still, she didn't pity him. She studied him. "You still want to fight?" she asked softly. Harry didn't answer immediately. He stared into the ashes, remembering the trio, remembering his father, remembering every mistake that had brought them here. And then finally, he rose. "No," he said. "I don't want to fight." His eyes hardened, flames of determination cutting through the grief. "I have to." Their vow was tested almost immediately. The acolytes of evil Spider-Man descended on this ruined Earth, seeking more souls to deliver to their master. Scorpion, augmented with demonic armor, slithered across the rubble, hunting. Craven's spear gleamed with runes of fire. Harry and MJ stood their ground. It wasn't a clean fight. Harry's suit was tattered, his webbing burned, his strength diminished. MJ's agility carried her far, but she had never faced predators like these. They were nearly crushed, their bodies thrown into broken glass and fire. And then, as Scorpion closed in for the killing blow, the ground shook. Not from him, not from Harry, but from below. Whispers rose through the cracks. Dozens, hundreds, souls screaming in unison. The villains staggered, clutching their ears as the whispers pierced their minds. Harry looked up, bloodied but defiant. "They're not done," he spat. MJ's eyes widened as she realized what he meant. The dead. The trio, they were still fighting. Above them all, evil Spider-Man clutched the throne with both hands. His claws dug so deep that ichor dripped down his palms. The whispers were louder now, surging in defiance. "Shut up," he howled into the void. "I own you." But in hell, Peter Parker's ghost smiled for the first time. "No," he said, his voice echoing with the voices of every spider who had ever fallen. "Not anymore." The throne room cracked. Not the stone, not the universe around it. The throne itself, once a monument of infinite authority, forged from the strands of the web he had stolen, now fractured in spider-leg fissures. The glow it bled was not gold, it was red, a pulse of rebellion that matched the whispers clawing at his skull. Evil Spider-Man rose from it, staggering like a drunk god, his claws slicing at the air as if to shred voices no one else could hear. His acolytes, Craven, Scorpion, Ock, Goblin, Venom, watched in silence. None dared speak, none dared question, until one did. "You bleed," Doc Ock rasped, his voice twisted through metal plates fused into his jaw. "Your throne cracks. Perhaps you are not what you claim." The room froze. The whispering stopped, and in the silence, evil Spider-Man smiled. It was not humor. It was hunger. In an instant, Ock was in the air, his metal limbs jerking as if yanked by invisible strings. Evil Spider-Man's claws pierced the symbiote-plated chest, tearing it apart like wet cloth. The villain screamed once before his soul was ripped free in a column of blue-white fire. Evil Spider-Man inhaled it, drank it like venom. When he dropped Ock's husk to the floor, there was nothing left inside. The whispering returned, but softer now, replaced with gasps of horror from the others. "Anyone else?" Evil Spider-Man asked, blood dripping from his fangs. His voice was calm, almost playful. "No? Then kneel." They all did, even Kraven. But the doubt in their eyes was fire he could not extinguish. Far away on the shattered earth, where Harry Osborn's world once thrived, the battle raged. Harry's body ached with every breath. MJ's arms trembled. Her webbing snapped and burnt. But the villains had faltered. They clawed at their ears, staggered on their knees, screaming against the voices crawling into their skulls. And in that moment of reprieve, Harry moved. His fist cracked against Scorpion's jaw, sending him skidding across the rubble. MJ dove low, wrapping Goblin's legs and flipping him hard into broken glass. The fight wasn't won, it wasn't even close, but it was survival. And survival was victory enough. When the villains finally retreated, dragging Ock's hollow corpse behind them, Harry collapsed against the wreckage. "They saved us," he whispered, blood pooling in his mouth. MJ looked at him, confused. "Who?" Harry's eyes flickered with grim recognition. He had felt it, the same whispers that had driven the villains mad, but to him, they weren't torment, they were familiar. "They did," he said softly, "the ones who already fell." In hell, the trio rallied their army. Souls of spiders long devoured, Ben Reilly, Kane, Noir, countless nameless warriors now remembered their faces. Their voices rose into defiant roars that echoed through the void. Peter clenched his fists, his eyes bright. "He feels us now. We're cutting through. We can't stop." MJ's ghost laid a hand on his shoulder. "Then we don't." Harry's ghost raised his blade, forged from raw strands of memory. "We take back everything." The chorus rose higher, and above, evil Spider-Man screamed. In the throne room, his claws slammed against the cracked stone. His breath rattled in fury. "They think they can crawl back," he muttered. "They think they can scratch their way out of my gut." His voice grew louder, unhinged. "But they don't understand. I am the web. I am the end." The acolytes said nothing. But the seed of doubt had grown roots, and in the ruins, OG Harry and MJ 2002 looked out at the broken horizon, the world collapsing piece by piece. Harry wiped the blood from his mouth, his eyes narrowing with the first spark of purpose since his world fell. "He's breaking," Harry said. MJ raised a brow. "And that helps us how?" Harry's fist tightened. "Because if he can break, he can bleed." Act Sate, the Soul Rebellion. Hell burned brighter than it ever had. Not with fire, but with voices. The trio, Peter, MJ, Harry, stood at the front of an army that had no flesh, no weapons, but memory and rage. Every fallen spider, every variant whose soul had been ripped from the web, now remembered their pain, and pain was sharper than steel. When Peter raised his fist, the damned followed. When MJ shouted, the echoes shook the black sky. When Harry's blade, woven from the strands of the web they once belonged to, carved across the void, the legions of the dead roared, and they struck. The ground split into rivers of screaming flame as the spectral spiders hurled themselves against demonic sentries that had chained their souls for centuries. Spikes of bone shattered under spectral webs. Fire itself bent into shapes of spiders, crawling across the walls of hell like an omen. It wasn't just rebellion, it was resurrection. Above, evil Spider-Man staggered on his throne, claws sunk deep into the armrests as the war in hell rattled through his veins. Every soul that fought below was a soul he had stolen, a soul he had eaten. And now they clawed their way out of him. He could feel them tearing, scratching, demanding freedom. "No," he growled, smashing his claws into the stone floor. "No, you are mine." The acolytes shrank back, watching their god bleed shadows from his mouth. But Harry and MJ saw opportunity. From the ruins, Harry sprinted forward, his body broken but refusing to fall. Every step was agony. His ribs cracked, his lungs whistled. But when Venom lunged, Harry ducked low and drove his fist, wreathed in blood and webbing, into the monster's jaw. MJ followed, her webs striking like lightning, tangling Kraven and yanking him hard against the rubble. For every blow they landed, for every cut they took, Harry and MJ refused to stop. "Now," Harry roared, his voice tearing from his throat. MJ hurled a web line of fire into the throne room's crack. It wasn't just silk. It was tethered to something deeper, something beyond. And when it struck, the fissure split wide. For a heartbeat, the throne's glow flickered. Evil Spider-Man snarled, clutching at the crack. His eyes widened as he saw what lay beyond. Not void, not power, but the trio, their spectral army, surging upward through the breach. They weren't whispers anymore. They were war. The dead spiders poured through spectral blades, spectral webs, spectral fire burning against the throne's corrupted stone. For the first time, evil Spider-Man looked afraid. And for the first time, Harry Osborn looked hopeful. But hope was fragile. The acolytes reacted with fury. Venom's claws tore into spectral webs, dissolving them with a shriek. Goblin unleashed a storm of pumpkin bombs, their hellfire scattering ghostly spiders like broken glass. Kraven ripped spectral warriors apart with his bare hands, howling with triumph at killing them a second time. The rebellion was not victory. It was slaughter. And still, the trio fought. Peter's ghost hurled himself at Venom, webs of pure memory searing against the symbiote's flesh. MJ's ghost lashed Goblin's throat with a chain of light. Harry's ghost drove his blade straight into Kraven's chest. They were not flesh. They were not alive. But they refused to die again. In the chaos, evil Spider-Man rose, his claws trembling. The throne cracked wider, bleeding, not power but weakness. His body spasmed with every soul clawing to escape. "You want freedom," he hissed, his voice a howl that shattered stone. "Then I'll show you what freedom means." He spread his arms wide. Power poured out of him in torrents of black flame, swallowing ghosts, shattering the rebellion in waves. The trio screamed, their forms splintering under the force. But before the blast could erase them, Harry Osborn moved. He hurled himself into the stream, his body igniting, his mask tearing away. He screamed against the power, holding it back with everything he had. His blood became fire, his bones became stone. And for a moment, just a moment, the souls of the trio stood tall again. The rebellion lived, and far above the battlefield, beyond even hell itself, Mephisto smiled, watching, waiting. Because rebellion or not, victory or not, every soul that fought was still chained to him, and chains, unlike webs, never broke. The throne cracked. Chunks of obsidian fell away as evil Spider-Man writhed, his claws digging into his own chest. Shadows spilled from the wounds like black blood, each strand of darkness screaming with a voice of the damned. The trio's rebellion had torn holes in his armor, exposing the raw truth of what he was. Not a god, but a prison. Harry Osborn lay broken at the base of the throne, smoke rising from his torn suit. Every breath was a knife, but he still clenched his fists, refusing to fall. MJ 2002 dragged herself beside him, her mask split in half, eyes burning with fury. We heard him, Harry rasped. He's bleeding them out. Above them, the trio's ghosts flickered. They had fought until nothing was left, spectral bodies split by Venom's claws, shattered by Goblin's bombs, torn apart by Craven's rage. But they still hovered, tattered and defiant, their voices echoing across hell. "You're not a god," Ghost Peter spat, his voice like burning glass. "You're just a parasite." Evil Spider-Man staggered forward, his frame splitting with light and shadow. For a second, his mask cracked, and beneath it, the eyes of Peter Parker, hollow and trembling, stared out. Then the light died. The shadow swallowed him whole again. "I am Spider-Man," he roared, his voice shaking the foundations of hell. The throne erupted into flame. The walls split apart. And through the fire, another figure walked. Slow, smiling, a red suit, black eyes, skin stretched tight across a face that had never been human. Mephisto. The souls fell silent. Even the rebellion froze as his presence spread across the battlefield like poison. "Magnificent," he said, clapping his hands once, the sound like a thunderclap. "Truly magnificent. My little spider, you've danced exactly as I asked." Evil Spider-Man spun toward him, claws raised, fury burning. "I don't serve you." But Mephisto only chuckled. "Oh, but you do. Every soul you consumed, mine. Every universe you destroyed, mine. Every scream, every tear, every sacrifice, all mine." He circled the throne, eyes glinting as he passed Harry and MJ. "Do you think corruption comes from nowhere, child? Do you think a good man, Peter Parker, becomes this on his own? No. I whispered in your ear. I fed your grief. I stoked your anger. And when you finally broke, I was there to catch the pieces." Evil Spider-Man staggered, for the first time uncertain. The voices inside him screamed louder, clawing, trying to drag themselves free. Mephisto leaned close, his grin widening. "The truth, my dear boy, is that you were never a god. You were my pawn." The trio's ghosts erupted in rage. Peter lunged, spectral webs blazing. MJ screamed, striking with chains of fire. Harry's ghost dove, blade first, into the devil's chest. Mephisto didn't flinch. With a snap of his fingers, the ghosts froze mid-strike. Their forms twisted, pulled into chains of fire that wrapped around his arms. He dragged them down, forcing the trio to their knees, their spectral eyes wide with agony. "Pathetic little echoes," he whispered. "Even in death you serve me." Harry forced himself up, blood streaming down his chin. "No," he croaked, stumbling toward Mephisto. "No, you don't own them. You don't own any of us." Mephisto turned his gaze on Harry, amusement flickering. "Ah, Osborn, the failed heir, the boy who wore a crown he could never bear. Tell me, do you still hear your father's voice when you sleep? Do you still feel the sting of his disappointment?" Harry's face twisted, rage breaking through the pain. "I'm not him," he spat. "I'm not my father, and I'll die before I let you take this world too." Mephisto smiled. "Oh, you will, and you'll die screaming." But evil Spider-Man moved. He lunged at Mephisto, claws bared, shadows burning. His roar was pure fury, pure defiance tearing across the battlefield. "You don't own me," he bellowed, driving his claws toward the devil's chest. Mephisto caught his wrists. The impact shattered the air, flames surging around them. For the first time, the ground itself trembled, not from Spider-Man's power, but from Mephisto's laughter. "Oh, my precious child," the devil purred, twisting the claws aside as if they were paper. "You don't understand. You're not fighting me. You're fighting yourself." And with that, He plunged his hand into evil Spider-Man's chest. The shadows screamed. The souls screamed. Even Peter Parker screamed. Mephisto pulled, and in his hand burned a light. The soul of Spider-Man, pure and broken, torn free at last. Evil Spider-Man fell to his knees, hollow and collapsing, his body cracking like glass. The soul in Mephisto's hand flickered weakly, its voice barely audible. Harry, MJ. Harry staggered forward, reaching out with trembling hands. MJ stood at his side, eyes wide with horror. They could see it. The real Peter, the man they had all lost, writhing in Mephisto's grasp. And Mephisto only smiled. Now, he whispered, raising the soul high above his head. The web dies with you. The battlefield was ruin. Hell itself shuddered as if the realm knew the end was near. The throne of obsidian cracked apart into jagged fragments, rivers of molten fire cutting through the stone floor. Above them, the web that once bound all worlds, the fragile, glimmering tapestry of fate, was gone, leaving only empty void, a silence where infinite voices once sang. Mephisto held Peter Parker's soul high in his hand, a light struggling against his crimson grip. The trio's ghosts writhed in chains around him, their screams twisted into fuel for the inferno that spread in every direction. And at his knees, the husk of evil Spider-Man crumbled. His body, no longer tethered to a soul, collapsed in jagged fragments of shadow, claws dragging through the dirt as he writhed in silence. For the first time, he was empty, a vessel with nothing left to devour. Harry Osborn stood with his legs trembling, blood dripping down his chest where claws had ripped him open. MJ 2002 leaned against him, her mask cracked, hair singed, but her eyes blazing. They were broken, exhausted, and hopelessly outmatched, but neither moved an inch. Harry, MJ whispered, her voice hoarse, if we fall here, there's no one left. He looked at her, jaw tightening. Then we don't fall. The first strike came from the shadows. Harry lunged, broken ribs grinding, webs hissing from torn gauntlets. MJ leapt beside him, swinging a steel chain she had scavenged from the battlefield, striking across Mephisto's arm. The devil staggered only slightly, his grin widening. Defiance? He chuckled, tightening his grip on Peter's soul until it screamed. Still? How quaint. He flicked his free hand. A wall of fire exploded, hurling Harry and MJ across the floor. Their bodies hit stone, rolled, burned, but they stood again, and then the battlefield itself erupted. The ghosts rose. Not just the trio, not just the Spider-Men and women who had died before. All of them. Every lost spider, every fallen hero, every echo of Peter Parker, who had been consumed by evil Spider-Man's hunger. They rose from the rivers of fire, their spectral bodies glowing with defiance. Dozens, hundreds, thousands. The battlefield became a storm of spectral webs. You don't fight alone, Ghost Peter whispered, standing beside Harry, even as flames licked through his fading form. Mephisto snarled. For the first time, his grin faltered. The ghost struck first. A tide of spectral webs lashed out, burning chains snapping, dragging at Mephisto's arms. His laugh turned into a roar as he swung his claws of fire, ripping through echoes, but more and more came. MJ dove into the chaos, striking his leg, forcing him back a step. Harry hurled himself upward, broken ribs screaming, driving his fist across the devil's jaw. The soul of Peter Parker flickered in Mephisto's grip. For a moment, just a moment, his eyes opened. Harry. The sound of that voice, the real Peter, shattered Harry's fury into grief. He looked up, tears streaking through blood. We'll save you, I swear it. Mephisto's grip tightened. No, you'll burn with him. The husk of evil Spider-Man moved, empty, soulless, but still brimming with stolen power. Its claws burned with the fragments of every life it had devoured. It rose like a broken puppet, tendrils of shadow lashing outward. Now, there were two enemies. Harry was slammed into the wall, claws slicing through his chest. MJ screamed as tendrils wrapped around her throat, dragging her toward the husk. Mephisto laughed, the battlefield a storm of shadows and fire. "This is the end," the devil roared. "The web is mine." But the soul fought back. The light in his hand burned brighter. The true Peter Parker, his essence at last unshackled, flared against the devil's grip. It seared his palm, cracked the chains that bound the trio, ignited the entire battlefield with raw defiance. The trio's ghosts broke free, striking Mephisto with a surge of spectral fire. The soul burst from his hand, flying into the air, hovering, burning like a second sun. And for the first time, the husk of evil Spider-Man hesitated. It looked up at the soul. It screamed. The battle became chaos. The husk lunged for the soul. Mephisto roared in fury. Harry and MJ struck with everything left in their bodies. The ghosts swarmed, burning, fading, rising again. And then, the soul of Peter dove. It slammed into the husk, igniting it from within. A scream like thunder erupted as light and shadow tore themselves apart. For an instant they saw him, Peter Parker, his true face free of corruption, eyes burning with tears. "Harry, MJ, I'm sorry." The explosion ripped hell apart. The throne shattered into dust. The rivers of fire split into oceans. Ghosts swirled into storms of light. Mephisto was hurled back, roaring. His body burned and cracked. And at the center, Harry staggered forward. He grabbed the husk's broken mask, pulled it close, and whispered, "You're not alone." The husk collapsed into dust. The soul flared one last time, then slowly, peacefully, began to fade into the void. Mephisto rose, burning, his grin twisted with rage. "No matter," he hissed. "Another Parker falls. Another web burns. I am eternal. You will all bow." The ghosts surrounded him, thousands of voices rising together. They formed one web, not of silk, not of fate, but of defiance. They dragged Mephisto into its light, screaming as the web seared through his flesh. Harry and MJ watched as the devil writhed, chains snapping across his body, dragging him into the void. His screams echoed across every universe. And then, silence. The battlefield crumbled. Hell itself collapsed into dust. The ghosts looked to Harry one last time. The trio smiled faintly, their faces softening. "Carry us home," Ghost Peter whispered. And then they were gone. Silence. Darkness. Then light. The battlefield of hell had collapsed. The throne shattered. The armies of corrupted spiders dissolved into ash. Mephisto's body, split and burning from within, crumbled into nothing. For the first time in eternity, the devil was gone. Truly gone. There was no second shadow, no lurking echo, just absence. The surviving spiders, Harry, MJ 2002, and the few multiversal stragglers, stood at the edge of a fading inferno. Their universes, some restored, some lost forever, began to pull them home. The web was reborn, but not perfect. Whole strands glowed bright, while others were frayed beyond repair. And in the center of it all drifted Peter Parker. Not the monster who had devoured his way across dimensions. Not the husk that laughed while he burned worlds. But the soul that had been trapped all along, now free. His form was ghost-like, scarred with memories. He saw flashes. MJ in the warehouse, the ring in his pocket. Aunt May's scream before the glider struck. His reflection in Norman's mirror, laughing for the first time. Peter placed a hand on his chest. "I remember. All of it." MJ 2002 looked at him with tears, but she knew this wasn't her Peter. Still, she whispered, "Thank you." Peter shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just make sure the one who still laughs, never comes back. Promise me." Harry stepped forward, voice cracking. "What about you? Where do you go now?" Peter smiled faintly. For once, not broken, not corrupted, just tired. Home. And with that, his soul dissolved into light, darkness, stars. The ghost of Peter Parker sits alone on a cracked fragment of webbing, drifting in the void. His suit is gone. He is simply himself, scarred, weary, but no longer laughing. From the shadows, a massive figure emerges. The Watcher. "You carried a burden no man should," Uatu says, voice echoing like eternity. "You broke, you fell, and still, you chose redemption in the end." Peter looks down. "Doesn't change what I did. The people I killed, the worlds I burned." "The multiverse remembers scars," the Watcher replies. "But it also remembers healing. The souls you freed, the threads you repaired, they are real. Their universes live again. Most of them." Peter's eyes harden. Most? Some were too far gone, Harry's world among them. Those who survived must carry forward without a home. That is their burden. Peter lets out a long breath, nodding. Then he asks the question that's been burning inside him. "And me? Am I done?" The Watcher tilts his head. "That is your choice. Your soul is untethered. You can fade into peace, or return to your universe, reborn. But if you return, Peter Parker, you will remember every scream, every death, every laugh." Peter's eyes flicker with both pain and determination. Maybe remembering is the point. The Watcher leans closer, a rare softness in his cosmic gaze. "Then answer me, Peter Parker. Do you wish to go back?" Peter looks out into the infinite dark, his reflection caught on the last shining thread of the web. His lips curve, not into a laugh, but into something small, human. "Let's find out."